That's one of the toughest things is once you're so excited you got surgery done, you're seeing the process physically better, but a lot of the times we really forget that the mental has to heal as well. You've endured multiple times of rejection, multiple times getting told by professionals that it's in your head. And for years, you've pursued what some of us think is a ghost. So it makes you question everything else around you too. You have to almost redefine those lines and those boundaries. And I think that's one of the toughest things that we get caught up in life and we don't end up doing, especially after having such an experience and another chance. You just want to take off and run with it and enjoy life. It's good. That's the point why we have the surgery, but I think it's also warranted. Let's slow down. Let's think about this. Have we worked through all the other aspects of what led to this surgery as well?
Welcome to Imperfect Heart, a place for you to join me, Jeff Holden, in conversations, discussions, and dialogue about our hearts and the impact myocardial bridges have on them. We'll talk with healthcare professionals, those in related fields that support our condition, and others just like us with stories of their myocardial bridge experiences. It's my intention for this content to inform, educate, entertain, and even motivate or inspire you in your personal journey on dealing with a myocardial bridge. Most importantly is to have you leave each episode with hope, knowing you're not alone and that what you're experiencing is real. The story is all too familiar. Most of us know it by heart. We've been dismissed, gaslit, told it's in our head, only to find after doing our homework that our myocardial bridge is likely the cause of the symptoms we're experiencing. Now, that's a big part of our story today, to be sure, but it's not the full message. Many of us have been unroofed and are in much better shape afterward than before we had our surgeries. I believe I can speak for all of us in saying that we are unbelievably grateful for where we are today. We were incredibly appreciative for some time after surgery as well, and then we began to settle back into our normal routines, the things we did before. And sure, we might recognize the gift we've been given, but life just pulls us in. I saw a post on the Facebook page from John Chan that prompted me to reach out to him, as it was a reflection on how easy it is to forget where we've come from. Forget our pain, our anxiety, our fear pre-surgery. And we get on with our lives. In some cases, even doing the things that may not be as healthy for us. For a young man in his early 30s, it's easy to get wrapped into life and to move on and forget what took place. But John didn't. He realized that it was important to not forget all that led up to the surgery and to work to give something back to those who continue on their journey to a solution for their symptoms. Regardless of where you are on your journey, you're going to appreciate this story. And it even has a couple of exciting twists that occurred post-surgery, partly due to the fact that he recognized his good fortune. John Chan, welcome to Imperfect Heart.
Hey, Jeff, how are you doing today?
Doing great and really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, same. It's been a minute since we've talked. I'm excited about this. It's been a while.
Your story caught me at a perfect time on a recent post that you had made, because I was just celebrating my 3rd-year anniversary, and you alluded
Oh,
to recognition of our gift of getting our lives back, our rebirth, our surgery, and unroofing really allowed us to get back to doing the things that we used to do. And so many times we take it for granted. It's easy to fall back and forget the entire journey, partly because we want to, but secondly, because once that pain is gone, you do forget it, and it really goes and gets buried somewhere. But there's so much more to that story, and you uncovered a little bit of that in your post because you hadn't been active on the Facebook site for a while. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And before we get there, let's review your situation. Take us that few years back to the realization that something was happening with you that probably wasn't right. And tell us what what brought it to the forefront.
Right. So, it started when I've done athletics and I've been an active person all my life. Never suffered through symptoms or anything like that, through middle school, high school, very, very active runner. Post high school, I started getting more into triathlons and more into endurance sports. And I was able to do an Ironman, multiple marathons, and just kind of kept that lifestyle going. And I felt great. I felt like I was in very good shape. But it wasn't until I was doing a ultra marathon that I really started to notice that around mile 28 or so, I started getting really uncomfortable chest pains. And it wasn't palpitations per se. It was tightness across the chest. And at mile 28, you're like, okay, I'm probably out of breath. I'm probably pushing myself a little hard. Let me start walking and, maybe drink some more electrolytes. The world just comes, you try to find a solution. But the last thing you think, it's something deeper than that. So, finish the race, everything's fine. I put it on the back of my mind. I'm said, hey, you know what? I didn't have the best performance. I didn't have the best training up to this. I'll get it the next time. So I started training again, getting more active, and I started noticing my athletic ability start declining pretty aggressively. And it wasn't a matter of years, it was a matter of months. And, within a span of 6 to 8 months, I went from being able to hammer out a 10-mile run to maybe doing 3 miles. And I felt like I was at a 10-mile run. So I knew something was wrong. I knew, there was something not right. And my heart rate, I would get up to 120. And for people that are familiar with heart rates, you know, some distance runners can hold 150 for a long time and it's okay. So, and that's where I normally was. And so, but I was at 120, I felt like I was at 160 and 170. And that was really, I was really, I had a feeling something was wrong. And that's really where my journey started to try to see what was wrong. Was there something wrong? What?
Right. Well, yeah, and first of all, I think you guys that do these ultra marathons are all crazy. We have Sarah Miller from an earlier episode, same deal, big runner, and just did her marathons and then did the ultras. A little bit older, and I think testament to your benefit, she had a heart attack,
Oh, wow.
and it took her out for a while, but it displayed clearly what her issue was because they had to start searching. Now here's this really fit woman doing marathons and ultras, and the next thing you know, she's incapacitated. You caught it early enough, and you could see that there was deterioration quick enough that had you continued, the likelihood would have been that something more catastrophic could have happened. So good for you for recognizing it. Most of us tend to live in a little bit more denial a little longer. You had a little bit of it because you said, "Oh, I'll just keep going. Something's not right, but I'll finish the
Yeah.
race," right? So what happened from that point? Once you recognized it, something's wrong. I got to get this addressed. Then what happened?
So I began my journey with cardiologist, have the biggest doctor's appointment I had before that was just a regular checkup. It wasn't anything big. And now here I am looking at cardiologists. So I'm in the room. I'm the youngest person in the room in the waiting room. And in my mind, I can think of, am I making a big deal out of something? Is this, am I in my head? And so of course, as many of the people probably listening, the testing started, the stress tests, echo diagrams, heart rate monitors. It just started. And unfortunately, for about 4 or 5 years, I went through that loop. I went through that loop of just, everything is fine, everything's normal. Your stress test came back phenomenal. I would amaze the nurses when I was doing the stress test because they would really have to push my heart for them to get what they wanted to see or try to make it, reproduce this tightness or so it was very stressing and it started taking its toll mentally on me because I was told, hey, this is in your head, this is anxiety, this is, bad eating, how's your diet, how's your lifestyle. So in the middle of all this, I, stopped eating bad. I stopped drinking. I stopped, I would get 8 hours of sleep. I mean, you name it, I tried it. I mean, I was doing yoga. I was doing whatever I could do to try to make this go away, because that's what I was being told. And, that's one of the stressful things through that, is that, you want to believe they make you believe that this is something that's in your control, and that's where it's tough. And I'm not, trying to, this is something still new, so it's good that we're, getting out and educating people on this. But I went through many years of testing denials, some visits there, because sometimes the tightness was just too much, and it was scary. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. And I went to go get checked up, and I would stay there the night and nothing would come of it. Everything's fine, you're in your head, try to get more sleep. So, not to beat a dead horse, but then I finally had a CT scan. And it was kind of, I feel like, my cardiologist was probably like, I don't know what else, I don't know what other tests we can do, but let's just throw that one out there. And funny enough, or not funny enough, but whenever we got the results back, at first I didn't open up the document. And I just went to the follow-up, and she was like, everything's fine, no calcium buildup, no anything, nothing concerning. All your arteries are open, fine, everything's great. Okay, and I left the appointment like, okay, here I am again, being told everything is fine, and everything is good. So I just kind of, I left it like that. And a few days later, I started getting chest pains again, like normally. And I was sitting down, I wasn't doing anything active, and I got frustrated. I was like, let me read this test. I don't know, something just told me to, hey, read the test. Let's see what's inside. And I started reading it, and that's where I found in the findings that said, found findings, deep MB bridge on LAD. And now I was like, well, what is that? And that's where I just went down the rabbit hole, and I found out what the myocardial bridge was and the symptoms. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I have. So I scheduled the immediate appointment, follow up again with the cardiologist I was seeing at the time. And she just dismissed it. She said, no, it's not, that shouldn't be causing that. It's not that. Plus, we don't really do anything, you know, for that per se.
Hmm.
So, what do you do then? You hit old Google. And then somehow I was able to find this myocardial Facebook group. And at the time, there was only 200 members or something along those lines. So it was very, very fresh. And I started reading through it, and I found that, there was hope. People who've had surgery, people who've had these symptoms, people that, were in this journey too, and we're still on it. So that's kind of what brought me to look at Stanford and Chicago.
So now you've kind of self-diagnosed. You recognize something's wrong here. My cardiologist doesn't seem to have a clue. She's not giving me what I need. You identify something from Google. And obviously at that time, both Stanford and Chicago were pretty popular in terms of resolution through surgery, if not some other medical support with either medicine or medication, as they typically will do first to see if that's going to help you. And you start going down that path a little bit deeper. Tell us what that was like. What were you doing? You had Stanford on one end, Chicago on the other. I think Chicago probably a little bit closer for you because of where you lived. But, and one of the things, so people know, if they're not watching, they can't see you, but if they're just listening, how old are you at this time?
When this is happening, I was roughly about 27, 28.
Okay, so you're a young guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's definitely a concern when you're looking at your future. Going, wait, my career
exactly.
just started. I'm just down this path. I'm looking at a lot of life in front of me. Okay, so you get to the option to see that people are getting something done at Stanford in California and Chicago, which has another wonderful university there. What are you looking at? What's going through your head?
So I'm very young. I'm starting my career. I am, listening to my friends worry about other things or going through other moments. Meanwhile, I'm over here deciding what my next step is going to be on this medical journey. So it was very, and obviously going through life changes, cutting back eating habits, not going out as much, not drinking, things like that. It starts, you embark in this journey and you're really committed into it. So when I started looking at Stanford and Chicago, I was, after reading and finding out that yes, there's been some, cases where this bridge has been very impactful to the point where some people have heart attacks. I wanted a solution and an answer right away. So I submitted my paperwork to Stanford because at the time there weren't too many patients that had been unroofed robotically.
Hmm.
And so there was still some skepticism whether it could actually, the robot could actually really get in there and do what it needs to do and things like that. And so I submitted my paperwork to Stanford at first, and I didn't fully kick out robotic. I was like, there's something, this is new. This is just because it's new doesn't mean it's wrong, or it's sometimes people don't like change.
Yeah.
And so, I get that side too. So I was like, let me hear both of them out. Stanford got back to me within a month, and it was a big report saying, yes, we can confirm you have a myocardial bridge, but we need further testing and you need to come to Stanford. And the whole, you need to do everything here. So, okay, I know I have to do what I have to do. But when it came to scheduling an appointment, they were almost a year out. And now I'm, okay, well, I kind of wanted this done in about a month,
Yep.
I want an answer now. So I was like, okay, well, I have time to explore other options. That's it's not a decision you should rush into. So I submitted my paperwork to Chicago. They got back to me within a week, and they said, "Hey, we're interested. We looking at your documents here. I think we should get testing done here." And so within a month, I flew out to have my first tests done in Chicago. Right out of the gate, I was nervous. I told a friend if she could come with me and help me out through this journey because it was me. I was researching, I was doing all the insurance paperwork. I was leading the charge on this. And so I got to Chicago and it moved very, very quickly. They were not wasting time. I mean, they tested me a day within me getting to Chicago. And Dr. Blair was very clear. Hey, no, you definitely have a myocardial bridge that's impacting your day to day. There's no ifs and buts about it. And you don't have anything else. It's this. So he said, we'll set you up to talk to Dr. Balkhy. We'll present everything we have and we'll go from there. And then I had my meeting with Dr. Balky.
Yeah. And I think when we were talking earlier, it was a little bit different than you expected it to go. Tell me a little bit about that first round of questioning that you had in the orientation session with Balky, which is virtual, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So at this time, I'm back home, and Dr. Balky, we schedule a meeting. I don't know what to expect. I got my questions written out because I don't, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. My first question probably is going to be, am I going to die on the table? I'm scared, I'm nervous.
And I think we all asked that question. It was my first one. How many people have made it off the table? And when you said
Yeah.
everybody, I thought, oh, okay, well, that's one thing I don't have to worry about. I know I'll make it off the table then if everybody else did because I'm in better shape.
Exactly. So right out of the gate, I figured Dr. Balky was going to kind of go over the information and just, question me more on a medical side. But Dr. Balky came at me in a different way. He came at me wondering why and how I ended up in Chicago. He was curious on what my journey was to get to this diagnosis and what I wanted to get out of this surgery. And frankly, I told him, I understand that there's probably medication I could probably take to take care of the symptoms, but I don't want to do that. Right now, I'm in a stage where my body's strong. It can probably handle and recover the surgery pretty well. So, I want to take that risk. And we weighed out the pros and the cons. And, it was the pros definitely outweighed the cons. And, Dr. Balky, when we had this conversation, he was very stoic, very to the point, of what the objective was going to be. Then once he really vetted me on, the reasons why and how young I was and what the consequences were, we really dove into the details of what he saw and why he thinks this would be a perfect solution, or we would have a positive impact on, if we did surgery, because nobody can guarantee
Right.
100% recovery or 100% back to normal. But, you know, we were both very positive and very confident that this was going to be beneficial in the long term.
And I wonder if Dr. Balky also wasn't picking up on some of the depth you've got in the holistic nature of this whole thing. The thought process, which is what I picked up on that Facebook page. Here's a guy that's thinking this through a little bit deeper, and he's looking at it more on a holistic basis. There is a spiritual element to it. There is a faith element to it. There is a gratitude, recognition and give back element to it when we've had this good fortune of the ability to recover. And maybe that's part of why that line of questioning went down a different path. So at this point, had you then decided to go with the robotic surgery in Chicago?
It's interesting you say that, because Jeff, whenever I initially was flying out to Chicago, I remember sitting in the airport and thinking, okay, this is where this journey ends. Whatever, these guys are the top of knowledge. These guys know what they're talking about. They know how to test. They know how to look at this in the right way. And whatever they say and they recommend, I'm gonna do. And so I really put it up in the universe for
Mm-hmm.
the decision to be made that way. So I wasn't strongly wanting surgery, but I also wasn't, going to be against it if it was recommended.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to listen. I was going to listen to the professionals and present my case and present what my goals were long term and what lifestyle I wanted to live. And from there, it was going to be up to, what they, not up to them, but I was going to follow the instructions that I was provided.
And at that point, now you get to meet Dr. Balky in person. And it's you shared, it's a little bit different conversation once you had made your decision and you guys came together. What was that like?
Well, it's from the time of, deciding, okay, I am going to go through with surgery, to Dr. Balky, there was a whole preparation that, a month of just lots of emotional things that had to be done and prep for to get to Dr. Balky.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things they don't tell you is that, well, they tell you once you commit to it, right? That you have to write a will, and at age, at this point, I'm 31 or so, it's not something you really want to think about,
It's
you
true.
know.
Not to mention, you're probably thinking, I don't really have all that much. What am I giving up?
Yeah, and in the little stuff that I have, who am I giving it to? And so it really makes you think of where your footprint is in this thing we call life. And what have I done with it? And where is this leading me to? And it just really makes you think. I mean, as I mentioned, I have done triathlons, and so I built a gravel bike from the ground up. And I mean, it's got everything that I wanted to put on a gravel bike within my means, obviously. But I mean, it's my baby. And so, obviously, one of those when you're naming your assets, you have to really think of, who am I giving, one of the biggest stumps I hit was, who am I going to give this bike to?
Yeah, the thing that I took
And
so much pride to develop and build and ride, because if I can relate, it becomes personal to you. That bicycle becomes something that's been on journeys with you and grueling experiences. And you do give it some weird characteristic that we shouldn't, but we do.
yeah, it's kind of like misery likes company.
Yeah.
And your bike is your company when you're out there in riding those miles that you chose to go ride, by the way. And so so it really brings you to a point where you really have to take yourself out of this and really just kind of just think bigger picture and hope for the best, because you're prepping things, you're working, so you're having to schedule, deal with insurance and deal with disability, or deal with, the leave you're going to take, because you're going to have to take some time off from work. So you're handling all those things. And so by the time you get to Dr. Balkhy, I don't want to say you've dot all your T's and your I's, but you're at a point where I'm ready.
Mhm.
Wherever this leads, if these are my last few days that I get to explore the world because something goes terribly south, then that's where it is. And I think that's the weight of this surgery that sometimes people tend to kind of just dismiss and just forget that it is actually a process you have to really think through. But I get to Dr. Balky, and Dr. Balky is, night and day from the Zoom call. He's smiling. He's like, "Hey, welcome to Chicago. How you been? Have you had pizza yet?" Okay, cool. Well, hey, let's and I remember this as one of the most interesting things, that we started looking at the test and the catheters, and where it shows how much the compression is
Yes.
actually being made on the artery. And he's like, "Whoa, like, how are you not feeling this right now? Like, this thing disappears." And I'm like, I don't know. You tell me." And so, no, no, I think, I'm really excited about this. I think we're definitely going to be able to, you're going to see difference in this. And, he gave me some small instructions and said, "Hey, get some rest. You have a big day in the next 2 days testing and getting ready for this, and you're in good hands." And that was it. And then I was off to get some rest, test, and get some pizza.
Good, good. So you did get some Chicago deep dish pizza.
The day before my surgery.
Perfect. Perfect.
The day before my surgery, I did get pizza.
Good. Well, so for those who are from Chicago, it might have been, Geno's, or it might have been Chicago Oven and Pizza Grinder, or
I don't, I should probably remember where I went, but I unfortunately don't. I think, I was taken there by a person that lived in Chicago
perfect.
for a while. But, my mind wasn't even on,
Right.
"Oh, where is this pizza?" My mind's the, "Hey, is this the last pizza I'm gonna eat?" And then, so, my mind was in 10 different places at this time. So I'd like to go revisit it. That's actually a pretty cool, that'd be a pretty cool adventure to go back on.
It would be to mimic almost the trip that you were clouded with the first time, and now you go back, with clarity and enjoyment and gratitude for the experience. So you have your surgery, and it seems like everything goes well. And we are coming up, my friend, on an anniversary for you, February 22nd, correct?
Right. Yes.
So
Yes. 2 years now.
that's amazing. How are you? How are things? How do you feel? What are you able to do?
So you know, the surgery gave me my life back. My recovery was very quick, almost too quick, to the point where I was a little skeptical on how quick it was. I didn't want to hurt myself, but I was able to, run, lift weights pretty quickly. Fast forward to now, I was able to, I sorted through the mental side of things too during this process, because that's one thing that, you know, we tend to forget. Our bodies have gone through so much pain and so much, they've endured so much from this, but the mental side of things are also need to be healed. We've gone through many diagnoses where we were told we were wrong. We might have been led to think that we had anxiety or we had some sort of other thing. And I'm not saying that all medical professionals are wrong, or any of that. I believe we should seek medical help and professional help, but you have to take care of that side. You have to put yourself back in a confident mental state, and you have to really deal with those things too, because they're there, they're still there, and you have to set healthy boundaries too with that. You've been fighting something for so long, or a thing that you you were chasing a ghost essentially, and then the ghost actually appeared,
Hmm.
and it was real. So dealing with that, it's a journey. It's a journey in itself. And I think some people, me for example, got back to life so quickly. I I got up back on the bike. I was able to be of service. I was able to show up for my family in ways that normally I probably wouldn't have been able to, just because of the physical need and demand that whatever task demanded of it. I was able to continue my life and not have this on the top of my mind. I met my wife, got married, and now, we started a family. And so
That's
it's
awesome. That's
really,
just so awesome to
it's,
have the
it's,
confidence, to be able to do it. You probably wouldn't have been so open to the situation had you still been suffering. And here you are 2 years later now, married, child, and that's some big changes, my friend. Those are some big changes. So congratulations on that as well, having almost nothing to do with the physical capabilities at this point.
yeah, no. And so it was constant change. In constant change, obviously, there's prepping for a marriage, and now there's prepping for a child. And so the mentality just doesn't stop, and transitioning from, single, couple, parents, and recovering mentally from this traumatic, situation you were in for quite a few years. I mean, it's not a situation. I mean, I don't know if traumatic is the right word used here, but having to have this on the top of your mind for so many years, and now it just falls behind. There comes a time, which was obviously, the beginning of the year is a time for people to reflect and kind of set New Year goals and just slow down life. The holidays are over, everything is settling down. That's what inspired me to make that post on the group again, because, I really slowed down. I said, hey, if I wouldn't have had this surgery, I probably wouldn't have done any of this things that got done, or I wouldn't have had these things. And
Mhm.
so, I being as young as I am, and I say I'm young, but but
I'm looking at
I'm
somebody. I'm
getting
looking
I'm
at somebody 30 years my junior. So you're young.
I'm getting up there, but
Can't
for
stop
the
that.
age group that for the age group that I am in, sometimes it's very easy to just get so
Mhm.
focused on your growth and so focused on you and getting things done, achieving this, achieving that, doing whatever you set your mind to. But sometimes it's good to stop and remember that there's still people fighting this fight.
Mhm.
There's still people in that Facebook group, which is now 2K and above and growing.
Yeah, almost
There's still
2,700, maybe a little
people,
more.
yeah, there's still people out there that are just finding this out. And the other day, I saw a question, and somebody posted, hey, can I do this if I have a bridge? I just found out I have a bridge, and I remember being at that point
Mhm.
and being at that unknown, and at that fearful level of, is this going to trigger a heart attack? Is this going to make it worse? So that's kind of what inspired me to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be a little bit more proactive in this community and tell my story, and encourage young people, because I've had the pleasure to have a few conversations with a few guys in the group, and who have gone forward and had surgery. But one of the things that I tell them is, you have your whole life ahead of you. You have a family. You're establishing a family. It's scary to take this leap of faith right now, but it's better for you to do it right now that you're young and strong, and then move on, because it's not going to get it's I don't think it's going to get any better. I think it's just going to be prolonged, and at one point or another you'll have to make a decision about it. So I think it's scary. I think it's, very intimidating, but the other side of, coming out of surgery is also, I can't even begin to describe how it is.
Mhm. Well, you hit the nail on the head on all points. It's so true when we're in the space, not certain. And I think that uncertainty is the biggest challenge for many of us. When you don't know what either the cause or the end result is going to be, it really can freeze you. And that's what creates the anxiety and certainly stress and fear. And sleepless nights. Am I going to make this? Am I not going to make this? What happens if I'm talking with somebody right now whose surgery is scheduled in about 3 weeks, and she's worried she's not going to make it because the symptoms just seem to get worse and worse and worse. And many of us understand that. We understand what that feels like and what that does to your head, and it consumes every minute it's going through. You're sitting at dinner going, I don't know, I can't eat much because I don't feel well. I'm going to go to sleep. Well, I'm a little afraid to go to sleep because what if I go to sleep? Am I going to wake up? Just all these things that cascade once you're aware, and especially when you know that you have an end in sight to the surgery. I just got to make it to my surgery. I just have to make it to my surgery, and then I can deal with it after that. But the awareness that you've got and your confidence and ability to share it at this stage of the game, I think speaks volumes for the gratitude that you have for the outcome. And it's going to benefit so many people who are in that similar space, who are younger, who are looking at that same situation. They're faced with a career and maybe they already have a young family. But to your point of getting it done sooner than later, once you've been diagnosed, we all know it doesn't get better. It only deteriorates. The rapidity with which it deteriorates is different for all of us. You had a quick deterioration. You noticed right away, man, I'm not even a year away from this thing, and all of a sudden I can't do what I used to do just 6 months away or 6 months prior. So that's huge. And the recognition of it is huge. And the ability to share it is something I applaud you for, because people need to hear this, and they need to hear it from all of us, whatever age we are, whatever gender, whatever ethnicity. We need to hear it from people like us, because then we can relate and say, oh, okay, and it's not some old guy telling me he's old, he's got problems. It's not some young guy who's an athlete. He's an athlete. It's a different situation. The more people we can get to share the story and tell others, the more people will be able to relate to us, meaning the collective group of us, that I'm like him, I'm like her, I'm like that guy, I'm like that gal. Oh my gosh, there's hope. And that's the biggest thing. If we can do anything from a standpoint of what we share, is give those people in that same situation the hope that they can end up on the other side of this thing in some way, shape, or form, whatever the choices that they take, whether it's robotic, whether it's sternotomy, whether it's thoracotomy, however they get there. In some cases, it's just medication that works, but pushing and advocating to get there is more than half the battle. So again, I really applaud you for that. Now, what are you thinking? You're still a young guy. Now you've got a young family, and you've got a career in front of you. What do you think about today in terms of the future as you see it?
That's a loaded question.
It
That's a
is. It
loaded
is.
question, Jeff. Taking it day by day,
Perfect
you
answer.
know,
Perfect answer.
taking it day by day, being trying to, it's very easy to get consumed by life, by work, by, what life throws us our ways and our, I don't want to say, our ambitions in a way. We get so wrapped up in the day to day and what like that we lose track of the little things. The fact that I just walked up this flight of stairs and I didn't fall and collapse because I'm out of breath. The fact that I was able to go to the gym for about an hour and a half and I I left. And then I was fine, and I had a great workout and I see progress, but most of all, being able to focus more on family. I think that's for my future. I want to be able to spread awareness about this and especially in the guy father communities, is that you being the head of household, sometimes you have to, I don't want to say you have to mask things, but it's good to be able to talk to somebody else and be able to, be vulnerable and say, hey man, I'm scared. I'm scared I'm going to die. I'm scared I'm not going to be able to be here long term for my family. I'm scared that I don't have the answer. I don't even know where to begin to look. Or if my job is so demanding, I barely have time, I have to take a sick day to make one doctor's appointments, you know? Like this journey can be, I don't even know how many doctor's appointments I went to. I lost track. Like it's such a, it can be so life consuming. So for future, I definitely want to help other young people, make this decision, feel comfortable making the decision, and not think that it's something like that people are just making a big deal out of something when it's really something that we need to be more proactive about, especially as something that's pretty wild. But I was listening to another podcast or something along those lines, and it mentioned that as time goes on, people are they're finding more and more cardiovascular diseases in people now, and that's something that back in the day, you didn't really think about. And now, I'm a big advocate of, hey, just go get a regular checkup with a cardiologist. Just I tell that to my guy friends. I'm like, hey man, just go to 1 year checkup. You never know. I've known some guys that they had blockage in their arteries and they had no ideas, and they were this close away to having a heart attack that would have killed them.
Mm-hmm.
And
You know,
that's Mhm.
I was going to say, and your girlfriends, your lady friends that are hearing this are going to say, what? And you're not telling us the same thing? They're going to go,
Yeah.
just your guy friends? What? You don't care about us, John?
No, no. Well, I mean, obviously,
I'm only
like
teasing
my
you.
wife is, yeah, no, my wife is way more proactive about, taking care of these things. And I think it's and funny enough you mentioned that, Jeff, because one of the other things that brought me to that post was actually a girlfriend that came to me and said, "Man, I'm having chest pains. I'm going through like all this testing and stuff." And it brought back memories.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, well, you're on the right path. Maybe ask for a CT scan with, this. You might have to pay out of pocket, but hey, it's worth it. You're going to get to the point where you need to be. And then the other thing I'm like, hey, be proactive about reading your test. If you don't, there's so much information online now that if you don't understand something on your test, you can just type it in and it'll tell you. So, you know, and she's one of my best friends, and she was with me through this journey too. And now I told her, I was like, hey, I'm not a professional, I can't diagnose you, but you kind of have some similar symptoms that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So she's getting some tests done and we'll see. But this thing doesn't judge race, color, age, which is scary too, because this isn't something that happened when I became an adult. I was born with this.
Mm-hmm.
So, do we need to do more testing when people are younger, to kind of determine this so it doesn't affect them or they are able to get to a long life? I don't know, but I do want to be part of that movement. I do want to be able to help. That's kind of where I'm at now in this whole process of this.
Good. Well, that gratitude it just speaks volumes, and it's so sincere. And to your point of authenticity, it's what we need to do. And the fact that you're here with me on the conversation for the podcast, as well as the engagement on the Facebook group and the acceptance of people to reach out and ask questions, it's everything for those people. And we have the benefit of, and I think personally for me, it's a responsibility. For me, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I feel responsible to give back, because if I've been given this gift, this blessing to continue at whatever age, then I have that responsibility to make sure that I can give some of that back to the people who are experiencing the same thing. And again, back to that hope and that outlook for the future. And we all know when you're in it, it sucks. But once it's over and you get to look forward, you're relieved. And to your point, to your post, to your discussion with me today, don't forget. You don't forget, because you wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for the fact that you had the unroofing and for the awareness and everything that comes along with it. So Fantastic conversation, John. I really, really appreciate it. And congratulations on the family, the family member. Do you still have the bike?
I do still have the bike.
Right.
I still have the bike. That is a hard negotiable to get rid of.
Perfect. Perfect.
That is, yeah, yeah. No, I get out and ride as much as I can. It's a little bit challenging nowadays, but not because of my physical ability, but
Oh, I
just because of
understand.
my
Trust me.
responsibilities. When I can sneak away, I get out there, and enjoy some biking. So,
Good for you.
but yeah.
Well, thank you from the bottom of my imperfect heart for the contribution and for the ability to express it the way that you did.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jeff. And I think you're doing a great job. I think, you've, your podcast, you've definitely interviewed some important people that are involved in this and have changed lives. There's no amount of gratitude that I could even muster up to, thank Dr. Balkhy and his team and the Chicago team for providing this to me and, giving me this chance, and it's just, like I said, I think you said it well, is I think to a certain point, we all that have come to the other side and have been good and have, even if you haven't been good or on the recovery side, I think we still need to be able to share those experiences and share what we're going through and give hope to people that are in the process, that are in those sleepless nights, that are in those trenches of fear and insomnia, and it's just, we can be beacons of hope.
Hmm. Well, again, John, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to Imperfect Heart. It's my hope that this information helped in some way to improve your situation or will help you better understand this condition. More importantly, that it gives you hope through stories that there is help and you most certainly are not alone. If you've been diagnosed with a myocardial bridge, please be sure to join the private Facebook group, Myocardial Bridge Support Group. For more information about our program or to reach me directly, visit the website, myimperfectheart.com. If you like what you heard today, please give a positive review, thumbs up, high five, or whatever your app likes. And be sure to share with everyone important to you so they understand what it is you're dealing with. Please subscribe as well. Welcome each day with gratitude and positivity. The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely those of the host and the guest and are not intended to provide, nor are they a suitable substitute for, professional care by a doctor, therapist, mental health professional, or other qualified medical professional. Imperfect Heart is a production of Hear Me Now Studio.